unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What's up, everyone? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. Ian is having some connectivity issues with his internet, so we may or may not see him tonight. But either way, I'm here, and I'm here to do the show. And it was a very interesting weekend here with the CFP first round here. And, I honestly, I was happy with it. Like, the first game on Friday was a close game. It was back and forth, Alabama had a lead and then it came back. And then the first game on Saturday was very close, even to the very end. It was a late last second interception to ice it. The Tulane game, I knew was going to be a blowout, so I didn't really pay attention to that one. But the James Madison game was interesting because James Madison kept scoring and kept putting up explosive plays, which I was loving. I mean, it's what I thought was going to happen, and it's exactly what happened. But I wanted to first talk about, okay, people are so pissed about this group of 5 teams getting into the playoff and upset with it. And I just, I gotta speak out because I have a platform and I have the ability to voice my opinion here. And we are, fans of a group of 5 team and fans of Power 4 teams. So it's obviously we are on both sides of the coin. I mean, Ian's handle for for God's sake is G5 Gibson. So clearly we are in the world of G5, and we also talk a lot about Power 4. So we talk about both sides of the coin of FBS, which that is the imperative thing to remember, is that it's not just called D1, it's called FBS. So all these teams, yes, group of 5, Power 4, it is under the FBS banner. So just like in basketball, all those teams are under the Division I banner. These teams are all under that banner. So they are there to compete for a championship. And, just like in basketball, where there are 1 versus 16 seed games, where there's blowouts all the time. And we thought forever, it wasn't until, I don't know what year it was. I think it was like 7, 8 years ago, when Virginia lost in that first round game. We never thought it was going to happen. I think they expanded the NCAA tournament in from 32 to 64 teams or whatever it was. It went from a much bigger expanded field to 64 teams in the early 80s. And so it went about, roughly 35 years before we saw that 16 seed win, and it happened. And you know what? It may take a while for a G5 team to beat a Power 4 team, but I feel like it'll eventually happen. And look at some of the G5 teams in years past, where you had Boise State with the big win against Oklahoma, TCU in the Rose Bowl. You've had other instances where G5 teams have won and beaten big Power 4 teams. And I feel like, I don't know, for whatever reason, people are just downplaying this and just being like, oh, it's a blowout, whatever. Well, there's blowouts in all of playoffs, literally in the entirety of playoffs. That's just what it is. If you look at some of the NCAA tournament games, the basketball games, there are countless blowouts in those games. Yet we don't seem to matter. But for whatever reason, because the expanded playoff has only been around 2 years, there's so much emphasis on these couple of games. Every game must be competitive or it's not worth it at all. And it's just I don't get it. I don't see the point of this, conjecture, this argument where, during the regular season, there are plenty of blowouts throughout the year as well, and they happen. Yet for some reason, when it comes to this playoff, if they're not a close game, people are, grabbing their pitchforks and, ready to storm town hall. But it doesn't matter because, you know, these games, like, they're going to continue to happen. And I feel like it doesn't matter because the G5 is still going to get a seat at the table. It's not going away. I feel like, because of like antitrust issues, that there's a good claim if they don't continue to have G5 to have an actual seat at the table, it's going to be a problem, which I think they will. And what I have always been a huge proponent of, and I think the thing that needs to be done is similar to the FCS playoffs where they have like 24 teams. I know it seems like a lot, but honestly, it seems like the best way to go about this. You give a bunch of first round buys to some of the better teams, and then you have all 10 conference champions get in. And so then we have all the MAC teams, all the Mountain West teams, all those guys get in. So we get them all in, and then we have them play against, some of the lower ranked teams. And then we go up from there, and then we have some have first round buys or whatever. But then we also, what needs to be done is have what has been a huge plus is having home playoff games, which everyone's again said how amazing it was to have home playoff games. It is an amazing environment to have these games on campus, and it showed from every game, from the Oklahoma game to Texas A&M to Ole Miss, and all the way up to even to Oregon on Saturday night. So clearly it works. We probably should have it for the second round as well. There's no reason to be in NFL stadiums. It's very neutered experience that doesn't really have, anything remotely close to the excitement that a home campus game provides. And plus, it's like that's what the whole point of college football is: home campus games. And like when you go to these NFL stadiums, it really kind of, just downplays that kind of environment and downplays the whole like aura of college football. So hopefully it gets to that. So more playoff games on campus. I think expanding the playoff. I know it's like, expanding the playoff again, but I just feel like if we get to all conference champions getting in, and then plus you getting like basically everyone from the top 25 gets in, that really kind of like solidifies, the teams that deserve to be there. And we'll see what happens. Cause like, I honestly feel like right now, 12 is a good number and I kind of like it, but I think people are so like adamant against G5 with this like narrow scope of what the playoff is, that I feel like if it's more of a broader scope and we add more teams in, then we can add more of the conference champions in. And then there's not as much of a hyper focus on the two G5s where it's like, oh, there's like 5 more G5s or 5 total G5s. So then it's like, you could spread it around, and then there's a chance for more upsets as well, which, everyone loves. Everyone loves what happens in the March Madness. Like, Florida Gulf Coast is a huge example of that. They were a 15 seed and they got all the way to the Sweet 16 and they were amazing. Dunk City, Lob City, everyone remembers that, and like, I don't know. I just prefer some system where we have more chance for upsets, a more fair system where there's equal representation of all the teams, giving them a fair shot at this. Like for the longest time, I remember in law school, I had, an essay on my amateur sports law class exam where it was talking about like antitrust issues with, the BCS at the time. And, this was 15 years ago. And like, I remember like, I was so terrible at antitrust issues at the time because I like completely missed like a couple of classes. So I was like, it was funny because I was like, I had no idea how to like argue the specific like legal structure there to like my Iraq was just so off because I had no rules at all. I just kind of like riffed and was just basically talking about the fairness of the sport and everything. And like, I did the best I could, but I did bad in that class. But no, with that specifically, like even then, 15 years ago, there was concern about, fairness and like the G5 getting represented and being part of the pool of money that goes into these things. Cause like they are FBS, like I said, like, so if they don't have a shot at one, the championship and then two, a shot at all that money, it's really not fair to all these schools that are in the same subdivision like they are. So, I know that was a little long-winded, and usually we start on something else with this show, but like I just wanted to get into it because I felt like it was appropriate to talk about, because there's a lot of chatter. Like people are upset because those two games weren't competitive, which I feel like the James Madison game could have been competitive. They were like right there a little bit in that first half, could have made it a better game. But they definitely scored a lot the rest of the game. But no, I feel like G5s belong. Obviously we're fans of USF, so we want G5s to continue. I mean, even if like USF gets out of G5 and is elevated to a Power Four conference, I still would want to see the G5s be at the table. Like it just is a better way of doing things. Like I know that we could have like, 12 of the best teams without any G5s and we probably would be fine, but we'd be complaining about the other teams on the edge. So like I feel like right now, if we can expand eventually to a larger playoff, which I think we will, it's showing that these games are drawing people to viewership. Like the numbers are there, the interest is there. And the other thing I saw was people talking about how like, now all these other smaller schools, these G5 schools, they're actually interested in what's going on way more so than they were ever before. Cause it was like, oh yeah, we might get win the conference and then maybe get a decent bowl. And that was it. But now it's like, wow, we got a shot at the playoff. Like there's actually a legitimate chance of doing something and it draws more interest in, there's more eyeballs on the sport. There's more people involved. I like bringing more people under the tent instead of being exclusive and only exclusive to like 4 or 5 schools. I hated that. I hated that about the 14 playoff. I was not a fan of that. I did not like how it was just a couple of teams, whatever, and the BCS as well. I know people like seem to be like, oh, the BCS was great. Yeah, but it was like 3 teams had a shot, every year, and that was it, 3 or 4 teams, and then like no one else really had a shot. So it's like, what? How is this fair? Like, like I want to give teams a chance. I want to give as many teams in there as possible. And I know it's like, it's like, oh, it's a lot. 24 would be a lot, but you know what? There's like 134 teams in FBS. So like, comparatively, it's actually not that big of a percentage when you put in like half the league for NBA, NFL, MLB, all the pro sports. They put in like half the teams into the playoffs. So if it's 24, that's not even that's barely a quarter of the teams into the playoffs. So I feel like it's going to get there. I think people would be excited. Again, we have more home playoff games. That needs to be key. And let's get into these games. So I got a couple of games to talk about. The 4 games on Friday and Saturday. So the first game we had was the Alabama-Oklahoma game. And man, Oklahoma comes out and just is storming the beaches and just putting it on Alabama. And it looked like it was going to be a blowout because Mateer looked a heck of a lot better than he had in previous weeks since the injury that he had in the Auburn game. And he looked great. Honestly, he was throwing dimes all over the field and was comfortable and making plays with his legs. And they were up 17-0, like at a drop of a dime. Who actually looked really good for them was Jermarco Carter, who had only had 6 catches up to the that game, and then in the game on Friday he had let me see what he had. He ended up with 3 catches for 46, but he was huge early in that game. Burks had a ton of plays. He was making all over the place. They weren't able to run the ball really early, Oklahoma, but they were making plays in the pass game. And again, up 17-0. And it was like, Alabama's offense was struggling. They weren't able to really put things together. They were, just not doing quite well with the passing game, and there was some drops again. For whatever reason, Alabama's had a really tough time with Ryan Williams like leading the FBS in drops, and then Jeremy Bernard had a couple of drops, but that didn't matter because at that point on, after it was 17-0, Alabama outscored them 34-7 the rest of the way, and they just rolled. And I will say the fact that Alabama got so many of those players back, Jam Miller, Cuevas at tight end, they had a ton of guys that were missing from the SEC championship game and the Auburn game, and they got all these guys back, and they looked from that point on where they were like dead for those first couple of possessions. From the moment after that, they looked completely different, like night and day from the previous weeks and that first little bit in the game. But Simpson, was getting sacked a little bit here in the game, but he was still making plays. Really, I have the turning point, and it was, there's a point in the game where it was 17-7, and Mateer is eluding a sack in the pocket, breaks to the left. He's open. He could probably run for the first down, but he sees a guy wide open downfield. I don't remember what receiver. I didn't pick up the number, but there's a wide receiver streaking down the field, and if he catches it, it's probably a touchdown. Hits him right on the money, right on the hands, and he drops it. And then the next play is a punt by Oklahoma, or a punt attempt, and the punter drops the ball as he's trying to punt it, and then as he goes to then pick it up and try to do it again, the lineman for Alabama blocks it as on the second attempt, and so Alabama gets a short field. They hit a field goal there, and then Mateer on the next possession throws a pick to nobody. I mean, there was literally no one there except for the DB for Alabama. I don't know if that wide receiver was supposed to break there. It really didn't seem like it. It seemed like he was going out, and the DB, though, was just low into the flat, so he was just waiting on something if there was going to be a tight end or something peeling out, but nobody peeled out. It was just him, and he threw it right to him, and then it was just a pick six. He just ran it back. Mateer couldn't even stop him. But so they tied it at halftime 17-7. And then, Simpson, he had a decent game after that. He made some plays. And then, it was Jeremy Bernard with a huge catch late. He like mossed that guy. He's like over him, and he just grabs it right over him. That was such a nasty play. It sucks because it was like I thought Oklahoma was going to have a better showing. Their defense honestly did not play that bad because, like, if you look at the stats, as far as what Alabama was able to do total wise, they only had 260 total yards. So it wasn't like Bama did a ton in these games, because the field goal they got off of a short field because of the bad punt. And then the pick six, that's 10 points right there that they got real easily. So the 24 points they had to earn as well. But like, I don't know, it felt like in most of this game, Oklahoma was kind of the better team, but then like Alabama just kept making plays when they needed to. The pick six was huge, and that really was the only turnover in the game. So that was, like I said, it was the turning point. It was the difference. I mean, Alabama was only 3 for 12 on conversions. Oklahoma was 8 of 18. So it's kind of amazing that Oklahoma lost this game, but they did allow a ton of sacks, which that was the huge problem because Bama was getting in the backfield and getting after Mateer, especially in the second half, which I think that was really the difference in the second half because there was like a stretch. I think there was like 2 plays back to back where there was like sacks and really kind of stalled Mateer's momentum. But again, this Bama team looked dead. They got smoked against Georgia and they looked like they were just done and like that was it. But they came back in this game. They were, it's crazy because it's like I thought, honestly, coming to this game when it was 17-0, I thought the game was over. I was like, oh, this is over. And everyone, like, man, you could see a million tweets from everyone saying the game was over. And like, it's crazy that it went the other way. It really is remarkable. I'm surprised that Alabama was able to find the plays necessary to get into this game, but they did. And credit to DeBoer for making the most out of this game because it was looking like it was going to be a one and done for Alabama, but they didn't, and they win this one. And now, they have a shot against Indiana. I know it's going to be a harder game than Oklahoma, but anything can happen now. That's why it's the beauty of the playoff is just, get in and then you keep winning. That's what you do. You like the NFL playoffs is the same way. Doesn't matter how you get in, you got to get in. And then once you get in, you just keep winning. That's all it is. Survive and advance, Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about the Miami Texas A&M game. Man, this game, it was like, I know people hate those like low scoring games. And I even saw the meme about Frank Beamer and the 0-0 Wake Forest Virginia Tech game where he's like holding up his hands, like cheering because it goes to overtime. And it's like, I like growing up as a Bucks fan when the Bucks were so dominant on defense and Bucks would win games 6-3. It's like, I'm not like, it doesn't bother me as much. Some people like get so like, I don't know what it is. They just kind of, they can't grasp that the game of football includes defense as well. And so like, these are 2 really good defenses, Texas A&M and Miami, and they're both pretty good offenses as well. But the defenses really came to play. Great. But then, the offenses, really came to play, or I mean, it's not the offense, the defenses really came to play. And like, that was the key here because like, both defenses were able to get to the quarterback. Carson Beck did not have a good game at all. Like I think he had like 100 yards passing. And then Marcel Reed, I don't think he had a terrible game outside of those picks. I think the picks were like the worst throws that he had. Like the rest of it, like most of his throws were pretty short. There were short routes that were like either, screens to the wide receiver or running backs out in the flats. But that was like really it. There wasn't like a ton of like downfield throwing outside of the one throw to Craver. So it was mainly just short throws. And then, the 2 interceptions were terrible. Yeah. And I think if he had back, like we'll get to it later, but the one at the end where if it looked like it was going to be forced there, if he just throws it out of the back of the end zone, at least give yourself a chance on 4th down. Maybe I don't know, maybe you got something there, but he kind of forced it there on that 3rd down with not much time left. But no, as far as the rest of the game, I think Miami defensive line, Ruben Bain and what's the other guy's name? Number 3 for them. God, I can never remember his name. What is his name? Let me see. The D lineman. Mesidor and Bain were like in the backfield like the whole time. And that's the thing with like Miami is like they don't need to, blitz the linebackers or like any DBs because they can just get pressure with their the D line. And that's a difference. Like Bain had 3 sacks, and then Keontae Scott actually had 2 sacks too. So like they did pressure a little bit with the DBs a little bit, but still, I mean, Miami's defense, I credit to them because they definitely, kept the pressure on, and there was the difference in the game, I think, because Texas A&M really couldn't get a ton going. They had, that field goal early, they got blocked, and like, if that doesn't get blocked, maybe it's a different game because it was such a low scoring game. There was like very little opportunities, and Miami had plenty of opportunities because the the fumble loss that A&M had, and then the punt return by Tony gave them good field position. So they had short fields, but they couldn't get the field goals because the Davis, the kicker for Miami, was missing. Like I think he went like 1 for 4 or something like that. And it's just bad day for him. But it was super windy in the stadium, so I understand that. So it's like tough on that. But no, I honestly, it was a really good game. I enjoyed it. Like it's one of those games where it's like super low scoring, but it's like it's kind of like where it's very thin margin for error. So it's like you make a mistake, like Malachi Tony had that fumble, and it's like, man, it could have been the game right there, but it wasn't. He, like made the touchdown at the end to win it. So he went from, being possibly, causing them to lose the game to then being the reason they won the game. So huge range of emotions there for him. And, Texas A&M, I don't know, Marcel Reed. I mean, I even talked about it in the preview show where it was like, if they, he struggled in those games against South Carolina and then against Texas. So it was like, I knew there was going to be a possibility of him being the reason for turnovers. And it was. He, had a bunch of interceptions. And, he's just, I don't know if his arm talent is necessarily there. He's very elusive. In the first part of that game, he was a reason why they were moving the ball at all because there really wasn't anything going on. The rest of the running backs for Texas A&M really weren't doing much. And, the thing that I haven't mentioned at all yet was the biggest difference in this game was Fletcher. Mark Fletcher, huge game. Like he was like his average 10.1. It felt like every time he touched the ball, it was 10 yards a clip. He ended up getting the huge run at the end of the game that was like, I think like 55 or 60 yards. But like, no, it felt like every time he touched it, it was just first down, first down, first down. And he honestly, out of the entire game, out of both teams, he was basically the only offense between the two teams. I mean, Tony, outside of that touchdown, he really only had a couple of plays. He didn't really do a ton, but they were bracket coveraging him, so they were doubling him up. So they kind of eliminated him from being the threat that he could be, which I think is smart by Texas A&M. I think that was the smartest thing to do. You just take him out of the game and, force the rest of the other players to make a difference. And I don't think they did. I think, I'm not the biggest fan of CJ Daniels. I think he's all right. He made, that one big play in the Notre Dame game and then a few here and there afterwards, but not really that amazing. And so like the rest of it was just kind of whatever. And, Beck, I think that was a smart play too by the offense or by the offensive coordinator to limit how much he was going to be exposed here because like you didn't put him in risky situations. You kind of just ran the ball when you could, put yourself in position to score, and don't force turnovers, which clearly Beck is a turnover machine when it happens. So like you don't want that to happen. So they avoided that clearly and they won. And now they're on to Ohio State, and we'll talk about that on we're not going to have a show on Wednesday because it's Christmas, but we'll have a show next Sunday. But no, Miami moving on. And, you know, I'm surprised. I would have thought that the stadium was going to be a problem from them, like noise wise, but they held their own. And, you know, again, the lines are a huge reason why they won. You know, their D line was impressive, and the offensive line made plays for the running backs, specifically Fletcher, to make plays. So, you know, Miami's moving on, and you know, we'll see in the Ohio State game because you know, I think Ohio State is probably going to win by like 10 plus, but we'll see. We'll talk about that on Sunday next week. Okay, last two games we got. Let's see, what do we got? Tulane, Ole Miss. Now, I was in and out of watching this because I was like doing some stuff, and then I watched the recap. I mean, you know, it was expected. You know, the first game was like 40-3 or whatever, so it was very similar score. You know, these teams, you know, they struggle like against better opponents, and that's just the reality. There are some, like we said, like when I started the show, I feel like if over time, if there's more of this, there'll be more belief by these G5s that eventually there'll probably be some wins. But I think right now it's just like there is a difference right now. And like, you know, Ole Miss is a good offense. And the thing with like James Madison, why I had such high belief in them was because they can score a ton really quickly. And they did that in that game. But, you know, Tulane, I never had faith in their offense. You know, even in the North Texas game, I didn't feel like they were like big on explosive plays, which I think you needed against a team like Ole Miss. They did have a few, though, in this game, though, which was surprisingly. But either way, they still couldn't finish drives, you know, and then their defense, I knew was going to struggle against a power offense. You know, Chambliss, the guy can run all over the field. He's got a great arm. Like he puts up, you know, a ton of yardage. And the wide receiver core and tight end, right? The tight end and Stribling and Alexander. Like there's just, and Lacey. I didn't even mention Lacey yet. And it's like, there's just a ton out there. And, you know, there's not much to really say about this game because it was like, I don't know, within like the first couple of plays, it was already like 14-0, and it was just a rout. I will say Tulane did fight, but you know, it's a tough go when like you cannot put up, you know, I was not expecting 20 plus points by Tulane, not at all. And they ended up with 10. So credit to them for sticking to it to get to 10. But I just feel like they never were going to be able to put a threat to Ole Miss. And that's it. I don't have much to say about this game. So I'm going to move on to Oregon, James Madison. Now, again, this game looked similar fashion to the Ole Miss game because it was like Oregon was just blitzkrieg and just scoring wham, wham, wham right away. But I will say that James Madison was moving the ball and had a ton of explosive plays, even in the first half. Like I know people are saying like, oh yeah, you know, a ton of their yardage came in garbage time, which most of it did, but I still saw a number where it was like 45% of their yardage came in the first half. So they were still able to move the ball. They had a couple of possessions inside the 20. A big problem with James Madison was they were shooting themselves in the foot, and they were just, you know, missing, or they were causing a lot of penalties, a lot of false starts, a lot of just stupid penalties that had them like inside the 20, and then they'd get backed up. They'd get real close, and then they'd be backed up. So it'd be like, you know, 1st and 15, 1st and 20, and it was hard to really like take advantage of the field position at that point. But I did want to say, I forgot to mention on the other night when I was doing the preview show, this is too small. I can't, it's right here on the screen. But so I went in my notes and I had it. I knew I had it because I remember talking about it. Or I remember writing it down as I was doing my prep. And I was like, Malik Benson had such huge games in those in the USC game, and I was like, Benson speed wise is similar to Chris Bell at Louisville, and James Madison had a real tough time with Bell in that game, and I was like, you know what? I think that's what it's going to be. I think Benson's going to have a huge game, and lo and behold, Benson had. Let's see, what did he have? Benson had 119 and 2 TDs. And I was like, you know what? It's just because he's like track speed fast. And like none of those James Madison DBs were going to be anywhere near close to that. And it's like, you know what? It is what it is. Like they're just way faster. And yeah, this Oregon team is really, really good on offense. Like I'm kind of impressed with what they did. I think defensively, I think people can be mad that they didn't hold them to less yardage and less points, but at the same time, I knew coming into the game, watching what I saw from James Madison, that they could put up explosive plays and that they were going to be able to put up at least 20, 25 points. That's what I thought. I didn't expect Oregon to put up a ton of points, but I did expect 30 plus. And I called it at 30 to 20, but I was way off, obviously. But it was, James Madison kept scoring. And, where my spread was not that far off, because if they had in that possession in the first half, if they had, instead of with that missed field goal, I think it was blocked, if they had gotten a touchdown there instead, it would have been a 41-51 game. So, I look, this game looked a lot better. This was enjoyable. This was way better than the Ole Miss Tulane game. I feel like G5 should be there. I think this is a good example of them holding their own. I felt like the offense, if a team is able to beat um, a G5 is able to beat a Power Four, it's going to be because of their offense. And that's the recipe for success in the NCAA tournament as well. You'll see basketball teams that guys that have been there many years, and their offense is like, especially if they're good 3-point shooters, they're able to hit those 3-pointers and build up a lead or eat into a lead really quickly. And it's the same thing here with if they have a good offensive game, if they're able to pass the ball well, which they did. Like, honestly, Barnett had a really great game, and I thought the play calling was excellent. Chesney, man, I'm excited for UCLA. We cover UCLA as well. And I'm excited to see what he does with, what he does with all the talent at UCLA. So, they put up their own. Wayne Knight, I thought he was going to have a good game. He did. He had a couple big runs, big explosive plays. Landon Ellis had a good game. DeGeneiro had a really great game. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun game to watch. There was a lot of scoring, obviously. 85 points. That's a ton of points. That's, if you had the over, you really beat the crap out of that number. So, but no, it was a great game. I think people are just kind of, I don't know what they're wanting. I really don't know, because it's weird. It's like, we're watching these Power Four teams and they're playing against Group of Five, and we're expecting I don't know what we're expecting, but I enjoy football. I enjoy playoffs that bring us these games. We have these on-campus games. This is what I've wanted a long time, and we're getting that. And it's enjoyable to watch. I don't know what people want. They want some kind of. They've got this what I call, or what's called graduation goggles, or where they the nostalgia for a past that wasn't necessarily there. I think the people always feel like the BCS is something that is not necessarily that great. It was 1 versus 2, and maybe 3 or 4 teams had a shot. But now it's all these teams have a shot. Everyone's talking about this. I don't know. I just feel like it's a better format of doing things. I enjoy the sport more because of it. I think we're having a good, this sport, college football, is better for it for having an expanded playoff. That's what I feel. I don't have much more to talk about. I did see these guys in the comments. Let's see. They stay on after I ignored them forever. Oh no, someone just said one comment. That was it, and I didn't comment back. Oh well. But I don't have much or more else to say. I enjoy the playoffs, the expanded playoffs. I feel like it's better for the sport. I feel like it brings more to the table. More colleges and regions are involved. People are excited this time of year. It's not just, you know, Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia and that's it. No, it's like all these teams, and it's exciting. I enjoy it. So I think it's going to be better for the long run of the sport. I think it's going to help with things. I think that makes, you know, TV contracts better, and I think that brings more money to these schools. So that's the show. You can catch us at haterradio.com. For all of our socials, it's Hater Radio. Just type it in, it comes right up. Please like, subscribe, comment on all these profiles that we have. It helps the algorithm boost us, please. We appreciate that. Ian will be on the next show, hopefully. And yeah, that's it. Catch us next Sunday. No show Wednesday. Merry Christmas, everyone. Next Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll talk to y'all then. Merry Christmas, y'all. Take care.